What's going on, everybody? Brezzy43 here. I'm back with our next video. Our last video, we talked about some Pokemon in Series 8, that the restricted Pokemon. We revised my tier list for where I put the Pokemon at the beginning of the format. The metagame has started to solidify itself a bit more. And I found another fun tier list that we can do for this video. It's going to be encompassing Pokemon that are not the restricted Pokemon. It's going to have everything available in Series 8. So it's going to be a longer video, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. Here's the tier list I found. I'm going to skip all of the restricted Pokemon just because we already just did a tier list on those. There's no reason to do them again. I've got S tier going to be Pokemon that are the best Pokemon, in my opinion, the best non-restricted Pokemon you can use. A tier Pokemon are going to be really solid options as well, really good Pokemon that maybe don't quite creep up into the S tier but are still really, really good options. B tier are going to be like good Pokemon that have a lot of things going for them but maybe just aren't quite as good as the S and the A tier Mons. C tier Mons are going to be things that are like okay things. They have some things going for them. They see some niche usage but ultimately aren't very popular. D tier are going to be things that I don't think you should use, that are just bad Pokemon, and this tier is going to be for things that just aren't in the metagame. There's some things in this list that are just not used at all anymore, and I don't think that necessarily apply. So we'll kind of go, we'll kind of shape them as we go here, but we'll start off. We're going to skip all these things. We're going to start with Abomasnow. So Abomasnow is a C tier Pokemon in my opinion, specifically because it has a niche. At the beginning of Kyogre's reign over the beginning of Series 8, I saw some Japanese players utilizing Abomasnow. It matches up very well into Kyogre. They have to use Hurricane to fight it, and you still offensively pressure them, and you have good stab against that team. But with the recent resurgence of Sun and how powerful Sun is, I just don't think that this Pokemon quite fits the cut anymore. Maybe it's better off in D tier. I don't think you should use it anymore, but it's like the top of D tier because it does have a niche. Okay, so I'm going to say Abomasnow, D tier. Aegislash, not really applicable. This Pokemon has never really been able to make the cut in Dynamax because it can't switch its form when it Dynamaxes, so it's not a good Dynamax candidate. Some people tried to run Focus Sash so you could switch your form and then still survive an attack, but I just think that this Pokemon never really quite took off in a Dynamax format, as well as for a variety of reasons, but that being one of the most prevalent ones. Selgor, not very applicable. It saw one niche usage. Water Shuriken with Palisand to get a bunch of defense boosts. It's not a very good Pokemon. Aerodactyl. I think Aerodactyl might actually be a D tier Pokemon. Maybe even like, again, high D, low C. I think this Pokemon has a niche right now that I've seen some people using. It's a very fast Airstream user that does check, quote in quotations, Sun. Because you've got good resistances to what Sun brings, and unfortunately Rock doesn't resist itself, and you are neutral to Venusaur's grass moves, but you do pressure the Zard and you do pressure the Venusaur as well. So this Pokemon potentially could be a decent Sun check if you built around it, and I don't think it's an awful Pokemon. Looking at its stats here, Aerodactyl. Like 105 attack is nothing awful, and 130 speed is quite good. These defensive stats are obviously not very good, but Rockhead is a pretty solid ability. Lets you use Brave Bird, and it does learn Brave Bird, right? It does get Tailwind, which is interesting too. Does it learn Brave Bird? Does not learn Brave Bird. Okay, so never mind. This Pokemon's bad. I guess it would run Dual Wing Beat for its physical flying move. Is that really all it gets? I wonder, I saw somebody using it recently on ladder and it didn't look like it was that poorly positioned, but man, I'm changing my vote. This thing doesn't get a good physical offensive flying move, so yeah. I'm not going to include both Alcremie forms just because obviously you'd run G-Max. I think this Pokemon is a solid C tier Pokemon. It might even be B, but it's good on some of the Lapras teams. Unfortunately, I don't think you can EV your some people had run in the past Alcremie alongside Dialga or alongside Duraludon. Alcremie is a new Pokemon from this generation. It gets a specific move called Decorate, which gives a +2 boost to both attack and special attack for your whatever Pokemon it's targeting. So, for example, if you decorate your Dialga before it attacks, it gets a permanent special attack boost by like a permanent Nasty Plot and Sword Stance in one move. Obviously, this thing's weak to redirection, so you kind of have to run safety goggles to ignore Amoonguss. But it has some good. It's a very good support Pokemon, and I think it's a bit underutilized overall. I've tried to use it myself. I might try implementing it on my Lapras team as well, but it matches up quite poorly against Zacian. So keep that in mind as well. But I think that it's a cool support Pokemon for decorating purposes. Amoonguss. Amoonguss, in my honest opinion, is definitely A tier. It might be S. This Pokemon is one of the best support Pokemon you can use. I did a quick tally of the Players' Cup teams. Amoonguss was on 13 of all of those teams. It's a pretty easy Pokemon to like tech for, but it has a ton of utility on a lot of different teams. It can help you versus Trick Room by being super slow and putting things to sleep. It provides redirection. The Lapras teams have been using Pollen Puff for their attacking move to heal allies. Pollen Puff was a move that used to only be available on Ribombee. It was Ribombee's special move, but Pollen Puff now, Amoonguss gets it, Comfey gets it, Butterfree gets it, or maybe it was Shiinotic's move. I don't remember. One of these two, it was specifically unique to them, but Butterfree, Amoonguss, Comfey all get it. Comfey obviously would rather use Floral Healing, but Amoonguss having access to this move is really nice. Obviously, Energy Ball and Clear Smog are good too, but this Pokemon has been a staple of VGC for a long time, and I don't see any reason for that to change now, and stats are showing that it hasn't. Matches up okay against Zacian, as well as some of the other restricteds. It's decent against Kyogre, reasonable against some of the other ones. Obviously, not amazing against Groudon, but not the worst Pokemon you could have. So yeah, that's my opinion on Amoonguss. Araquanid. I actually think Araquanid is a B tier Pokemon, specifically because its typing allows it to be very good inside Trick Room against specifically Calyrex Ice and Glastrier. You actually resist all of the stabs from both of those all the moves that they carry. Most of it here, I'll pull up Araquanids just so you can see. Araquanid resists fighting, ice, ground, and steel, which are the most common stab moves from our most common. I keep saying stab. I mean to say the most common offensive moves on those Pokemon. And it does get Water Bubble, which gives it which doubles the power of water type moves used by the ability bearer. So you can run Water Bubble, Water Attack, Bug Attack. It does get Wide Guard as well. You do kind of have to run Safety Goggles though, just because you don't want to get put to sleep by Amoonguss, which you can't really stop that from happening. But yeah, I think this Pokemon has a niche. I think it's a B tier Pokemon, solid Pokemon. And has a utility for sure, and it actually hits harder than you think, especially when you consider that when it Dynamaxes, it sets up Rain, which then boosts its attack even further. So, for all intents and purposes, it might as well be a only water offensive type. You don't even have to run a Bug move, but Bug is a great defensive type paired with water because of all the resistances that you get specifically against the Glastrier Pokemon. Arcanine. Arcanine, I think probably C or D. There's no real reason to run this thing over some of the other options you have for Intimidate. I'm going to put it in C just because it does always have the niche. It's the fastest, one of the fastest, or if not the fastest Intimidate user that you can use in the metagame right now. It gets a ton of good support moves. However, it just isn't quite as good in the restricted metagame. It matches up quite poorly against Kyogre and Groudon. It doesn't do super well against things like non obvious choices like these two. Also, like you compare it to Calyrex Shadow Rider and even to some extent, like just the lack of bulk that this thing has, um, and the fact that it's only mono fire type makes it a bit weaker. But it does get fast Snarl and fast Will-O-Wisp, which are both very good, very powerful tools to utilize. And this thing did see play for a long time until Incineroar came into the metagame, and then even still occasionally saw some utility because it's faster than Incineroar and can burn and snarl things before they attack. So same tier as Alchemy. Niche. I wouldn't be surprised to see some people still use this thing, but it's just not quite as good as the other options available. Articuno. This Pokemon's a bit difficult for me to evaluate. I think it's going to be another C tier Pokemon. Because it does get expanding force, and it can actually. Some people run Iron Ball. I've seen Iron Ball Articuno because it can Iron Ball basically removes its flying typing and allows it to take advantage. Excuse me, of the psychic terrain. It's one of the only Pokemon in existence that has both Tailwind and Trick Room, so it's got some utility for sure. I don't want to say that this thing's trash. It's just like. It's the one that's been the least used out of the 3 Galarian forms of the birds. It's still a good Pokemon, but it's just like it's more of a niche. So I'm gonna put it in the C tier. Articuno is definitely a D tier, this tier because it just isn't used. Same with Azelf. These Pokemon, Azelf's tough to evaluate. It just hasn't really seen usage. Azumarill, probably D tier. Some people used it as a Trick Room sweeper at the beginning of Series 5 when Isle of Armor came out, but Amoonguss exists, and it's really hard to pressure Amoonguss offensively while not getting put to sleep. You can set up your own fairy terrain, which is Misty Terrain, which is really nice, but you still like don't underspeed it. It redirects your attacks. It resists both of your stabs. It just doesn't really offer as much. There was some utility on a supportive set that I've seen with Sap Sipper and Aqua Jet to proc a weakness policy on Colossal with Perish. With Perish Trap next to Gothitelle. That was like the most unique way I've seen Amoonguss used recently, but I think that it's still just like it might be towards the top of the D tier just because it does have more things going for it than these other two, but it still is just not a very amazing Pokemon. Weak to Intimidate. Struggles versus Amoonguss sometimes, and like I said, you can set up your terrain and not go to sleep, but Amoonguss still resists all of your attacks and can pressure you with grass type moves, so not amazing there. Bisharp has been a tough Pokemon to use in this metagame. I definitely don't think it's down here. I think it's probably somewhere in this area just because it has some things going for it. Defiant is really good, but the most popular Intimidate users they pressure this thing offensively, and Incineroar resists both of its stabs. So it's not as amazing of a Pokemon, but we have seen things like Cinderace Bisharp, Blaziken Bisharp historically, things that are fast that can give it speed boosts as well are really good that benefit from deterring Intimidate, but ultimately somewhere in C or D tier. Not a phenomenal Pokemon, but does have some things going for it. I guess based on my definition, I should say C tier. I'm gonna stick with D tier. I think this Pokemon just isn't quite there. Blastoise. Blastoise has actually seen some usage. I think I'm gonna put it in the C tier, maybe like upper C tier, low B tier. I'm gonna say B tier. I've seen some people using Blastoise. Good. This Gmax form is quite good. All of them are very, very solid Pokemon. They get an effect that sets up a residual damage. Venusaur, Blastoise, Charizard, Colossal, Centiskorch, and something else. They set up residual damage for every turn for 4 turns. They get to take 1/6 of the opponent's max HP as damage to the Pokemon that are active. So it adds up really quickly. If they have 2 Pokemon on the field, they both take 1/6 at the end of the turn. Very good against Focus Sash Pokemon. Just really good in general. The only Pokemon that don't get affected by it are Pokemon that share a type. With the exception of Centiskorch. Centiskorch sets up Fire Spin, so it always deals damage, but if you have a water type in play, you won't take damage from Blastoise's residual effect. Similarly, if you have a fire type in play, you won't take damage from Charizards. If you have a grass type in play, you won't take damage from Venusaurs, and if you have a rock type in play, you won't take damage from Colossals. So yeah, but Blastoise does have some things going for it. I've seen some people using it a lot. on Liberty Note, I just saw somebody made top ladder with it in Japan. It has some usage. You can do shell smash things with Life Orb. You can also do White Herb. There's some things going for it. These residual effects are very, very good. So Blastoise B tier Pokemon in my opinion. Blaziken. Blaziken's pretty underexplored in this metagame. I think it's a C tier Pokemon. These stats are quite good, and you do get access to. You don't get its Mega, unfortunately, but you do get access to Speed Boost. So you can protect on the first turn it's in play, get your Speed Boost, and then start going from there. It is weak to Intimidate, so you would want to pair it with something like Bisharp or Thundurus or Milotic or something that can take advantage of the Intimidate users, but. It doesn't match up that amazingly against Landorus, but it does pretty well against Incineroar with fighting. It got access to close combat this generation, which is a big upgrade from Superpower. It still gets Flare Blitz, and I think it also people run Bounce, or I think it gets Brave Bird. Yeah, so you can run 2 really good flying moves, which gives you speed boosts. It does pair a little bit better with Bisharp, but Milotic works as well. Milotic can control speed for you with Icy Wind as well, so definitely a C tier Pokemon in my opinion. Has some things going for it, not quite good enough for the B tier, but definitely better than some of these D tier Pokemon for sure. Not applicable. Blissey's just isn't used. Braviary saw some usage. Braviary saw some usage in Series 6 and 7. But not so much in 8. I think it just isn't quite fast enough. But Braviary does punish a lot of these. It does get Defiant, and these stats aren't unreasonable. It is a little bit slower than where you'd like it, but it does have reasonable bulk and a good offensive stat, plus Defiant. I think it's going to be a C tier Pokemon. It has some things going for it. It does get Tailwind, but it's not quite there in Series 8 right now, but once we go back to Series 7, it'll probably creep up again in usage. It does get good coverage moves. It gets Brave Bird, Close Combat, and Rock Slide, I think. Should get Rock Slide. Yeah, it does get Rock Slide. So it gets 3 really solid coverage moves, or 3 really solid offensive moves, and you can run... there's no real reason to take advantage of the normal stab necessarily, just because normal stab as a max move drops speed on your opponent, and you are increasing your own speed with Airstream, which is better. So for that reason, I think it's a C tier Pokemon for sure. Bronzong, I think Bronzong is a B tier Pokemon. I was exploring this thing in Series 8 or Series 7. It's another one of those Pokemon that's like Araquanid, that it completely walls Glastrier, and it does get access to Body Press in this generation. So Bronzong. Body Press is a really cool move that allows you to take advantage. Your offensive prowess is taken advantage of based off of your defensive stat. So you can run max HP, max defense, and you can go for Body Press, Iron Defense stuff. Ferrothorn's been doing that a lot, because Ferrothorn's probably the S tier of endgame Body Press, Iron Defense users. But Bronzong has some different things going for it, in that it gets access to Levitate, and it can also set up Trick Room. Those are the 2 main things that Bronzong has going for it. You can do different things like Guard Swap and Power Swap. Safeguard's a pretty interesting move. Hypnosis could potentially be like a niche pick. I think some people have also gone for Trick, and I've seen Ally Switch as well, obviously. Bulldoze to proc a weakness policy. This thing can do a lot of different things, but I was running Protect, Body Press, Iron Defense, Trick Room with leftovers, and that felt like a really good set to me. So it walls Glastrier. You resist everything Glastrier can bring at you, except for Close Combat, which is already weaker. You set up Iron Defenses, and you kind of run through the end game, especially on a Lapras team where you get inside of Aurora Veil. So Bronzong, B tier Pokemon in my opinion. Butterfree, I'm going to just go for the G-Max one here. C tier Pokemon. I use this thing a little bit, and it's got some things going for it. Really accurate Sleep Powder, Rage Powder, annoying Pokemon, good at setting up Trick Room, and then dying. I think it's got some more usage than these D tier Pokemon, but definitely still C tier. Maybe it's D tier. Low C, high D, somewhere in that area. Buzzwole, I don't think Buzzwole's a very good Pokemon. It does have some interesting things going for it, like, we'll look up the Buzzwole. I spelled it wrong. This thing's got an insane attack stat, insane defense stat, but it's really frail, especially bulky, and it's got a 4x weakness to flying, which this is probably the VGC metagame that has flying type is one of the best types that you can be. So for that reason, I think it is like towards the upper end of D tier, low C tier. Has some interesting utility, but ultimately not a very good Pokemon in my opinion. But if you used it, it would potentially be... I'm going to do this. This just makes a little more sense to me. I think that this Pokemon has some things going for it, but not quite everything that you want in a Pokemon like this. Where would we leave off? Celesteela. I think Celesteela is a B tier Pokemon. Again, similar to Bronzong, this thing has a lot of things going for it. In a restricted metagame, Steel Flying is a phenomenal typing. It can go on to a Kyogre team and weaken the fire weakness it has. It can be paired next to Raichu and remove the electric weakness. It does get Meteor Beam Power Herb. It does get Leech Seed. It does get a bunch of different sets. This thing is a really solid Pokemon that does also get Wide Guard. So really good Pokemon in a restricted metagame. Something that I've seen some players take advantage of on Sun teams. Some players take advantage of on Rain teams. A lot of different things you can do with Celesteela. Centiskorch. I've seen Centiskorch rising in popularity a little bit. I think it's a B tier Pokemon. It definitely, for similar reasons as Araquanid, it actually, I'm going to put Araquanid towards the middle here. I think this is towards the top of the B tier. There we go. Centiskorch has some really, really solid things going for it right now. Centiskorch has White Smoke, which is an ability that prevents your stats from being dropped. So you can actually run a physical Centiskorch and take advantage of this pretty solid attack stat. It is weak defensively overall, but 100 HP and 90 SPDF is pretty solid. It sets up Fire Spin for its G-Max effect, which is pretty solid. Traps your opponent from switching. You can run Perish Song. You can run Yawn. Sage and Park ran a team in Series 7 with Yawn Togekiss and Yawn Gastrodon with this thing to help fight some of its weaknesses like water. But it also gets a grass move as well. So you can run like Charty Berry to help you survive a rock attack. And then you can run Flare Blitz. You should learn Flare Blitz. Yep, Flare Blitz, Power Whip, and like Leech Life or something like that as your 3 moves and protect. And it's a solid Pokemon. Matches up very well defensively against Zacian. Resists all the moves that Zacian usually brings except for Wild Charge. Pretty solid against Glastrier with the exception of the ground move, and matches up reasonably well against the Intimidate users. Kind of. They can like Flare Blitz you for good damage or use a flying move and stuff like that, but you don't get your stats dropped, which is the main thing. So I think Centiskorch has a lot of things going for it. Solid B tier Pokemon. Chandelure I've seen creeping up in usage. It's a C tier Pokemon. It gets Imprison, Trick Room, Heat Wave, Shadow Ball. Focus Sash is usually the common item. I think this Pokemon has some things going for it. Towards the upper end of C tier, might be higher than Arcanine as well. Solid Pokemon. Hasn't really changed a lot. I've seen some people using it. Chansey is a meme. I've seen people using it with a Violite and Shuckle. I hate this combination, but it's something that people are doing. I'll put it at the top end of D tier just because it is viable. You will win games with it, but they are boring in long games. So that's Chansey. Zard. I think Zard is an A tier Pokemon. This thing is... The damage that this thing can do is exponential. It sets up G-Max Wildfire, which is the residual damage that hits all fire types, or all non-fire types. Life Orb, Solar Power, Sun boosted, Stab boosted, fire attacks off of Blast Burn. Pretty nuts. Pair this thing with Groudon, pair this thing with Torkoal. You're going to be doing a lot of damage. Solid Pokemon. Has been for a long time in this VGC because of Dynamax boosting speed and everything. This Pokemon's very good. Cherim, I'm only going to include this one Cherim form. I've seen Cherim popping up a little bit. It's got some utility. It's got Flower Gift, which If you are familiar, when Sunny Day is active, Flower Gift allows you to give a 50% damage increase, attack and special defense of all party Pokemon by 50% during Sunny Day. So I've seen that a little bit on some of these hard Sun teams that run both Groudon and Torkoal. It's got some things going for it. I wouldn't fault you for using it, but still kind of niche overall, not super staple. Cinderace, Cinderace. I think this Pokemon's a B tier Pokemon, solid B tier Pokemon. It started to kind of creep up again in popularity. It's a really fast Airstream user. This thing really shined in Series 5 when it was one of the fastest Pokemon at base 119 because it could change its type with Libero. Libero is the same ability that Greninja gets, called Protean, that allows you to change the Pokemon's type to its last used move. So you change your type before you attack, which gives you basically 4 stab types and allows you to, but it's also used as a defensive mechanic, right? If you're expecting a water attack, you can change into a steel type, so it's not super effective. If you're expecting a fighting attack, you can switch to a flying type. There's a lot of different things you can do with this Pokemon, but it started to creep up again. With things being faster than it got a lot trickier. Regieleki, this thing doesn't love Regieleki, but it's a solid Pokemon for sure, and definitely something that you could use. Clefable saw some niche usage. I think it's like bottom of C tier, top of D tier. It's the reason why it's not as good is because Clefairy is just better at doing the follow me. I think Clefairy is probably A tier Pokemon. Clefairy gets Friend Guard and can hold a Violite, which makes its defensive abilities to redirect attacks with Follow Me a lot better. Clefable is a bit more offensive and does get the ability Unaware, which allows it to take weakness policy boosted attacks and not faint, which is a really, really cool thing, and actually be a reasonable offensive threat with Moonblast. But Clefairy, as a defensive, supportive Follow Me user, is just better than Clefairy or Clefable in my opinion. So that's why it gets the nod as an A tier Pokemon in my opinion. Colossal, this thing is A tier Pokemon. It didn't get worse. Everyone was like, "Oh, Colossal's not going to thrive in a Kyogre metagame." Colossal was on 9 teams in Players Cup that made top 16, and it's still very good. You compare it with Water Urshifu, you compare it with Dragapult, and it's still very solid. I think Clefairy might be a B tier Pokemon, but it's definitely towards the top end of B. Colossal's A tier. It's very good. This thing has won 2 Players Cups in a row. It might win a 3rd one. It's just a very, very good Pokemon. This residual rock effect is really good. It sets up the sun to weaken one of its weaknesses. Pairs nicely with Rillaboom for defensive switches. Good Pokemon. Very good Pokemon. Cobalion. I think Cobalion might be at its best it ever has been, because it of the justified and Dynamaxing. Cobalion, usually people would run Terrakion because it's just more offensive, but if you run beat up justified, Cobalion actually can carry the Assault Vest and gets access to Bounce, which gives it a physical flying move to boost its speed with max Airstream. It can boost its defense, and it can run one of these other moves like Stone Edge or Close Combat or whatever. So C tier Pokemon, it's got some things going for it. Nothing amazing, but it's got a niche. Comfey. I think Comfey is a B tier Pokemon. Definitely solid B tier. I think it's probably around this mid range of the B tier. Good support Pokemon. It gets access to Trick Room. It gets Floral Healing. It can proc a weakness policy with either Draining Kiss or Giga Drain through its ability Triage. It's the only Pokemon that gets that ability. Allows it to proc. Gives a +3 priority to its healing moves, so you can heal allies. Really good next to Dragon types, bulky Dragon types. I've seen some Zygarde players use it. Good next to Moltres and Yveltal. Just a good Pokemon. Definitely would recommend trying out Comfey. Conkeldurr had a really big fall from grace. This thing was one of the best Pokemon to use in the early stages of this VGC format, just because it cleaned up so well. Had good matchups against everything except for basically Togekiss and some of the flying types, but it was a very good end game Pokemon. Things got hard for Conkeldurr very quickly when more Trick Room Pokemon get introduced, when things just got really tough for it when it comes to all these flying types that are on teams and everything like that. So Conk, not quite as high as it used to be. Definitely not as good of a Pokemon as it used to be. Corviknight doesn't really see any play anymore. I think it's unfair to put it in this tier, though. I think it's probably somewhere in this range. It has some things going for it, but it's just strictly inferior to Celesteela as a setup endgame. People used to run Bulk Up and Roost and just set up in the endgame and try to win that way. But Celesteela just does that better. So does Ferrothorn and Bronzong. So Corviknight has some utility. I'm actually going to switch this. You would not run Gmax. Gmax is not a good alternative to just standard. I think it sets up, I don't even know what it does. Like, I don't remember what it does. It's just not, Gmax Corviknight's not very good compared to regular Corviknight. So that is Corviknight. Cradilly, I've seen Cradilly specifically as a niche. I think it's fair to put it in the D tier. Not at the bottom of D tier, but it has Storm Drain, and it's not an awful typing. Let's see, Cradilly. It only has 4 weaknesses, and it does have 2 resistances and an immunity. Gets a special attack boost via Storm Drain. Pretty defensive overall, but again, very niche. If you want a Storm Drain Pokemon, just use Gastrodon. I might even just put this thing in this tier. I've seen people use it. It's not fair to put it there. Cresselia, really, really big fall from grace. This might be one of the first formats where Cresselia is just not good, and that's because of a lot of dark types, specifically Urshifu Dark, just really, really pressures this thing. And Dynamax hurt it as well because the moves are stronger. It's just like Cress is such a bulky Pokemon that just isn't good in this metagame right now, despite historic metagames it being very, very solid. Like, these defensive stats are absurd, but it loses out on a lot in a Dynamax format, especially one with a Panda Bear that crits you with a dark type move. So niche for sure, but still seen on some teams, probably the top end of D tier. Definitely higher than Conk. I'm going to put Conk back over like in this area. All right, Crobat. I think Crobat is top of D tier, low C tier. This Pokemon has Tailwind. It has Inner Focus, which has been buffed to be immune to Intimidate, so you can actually run Brave Bird as an offensive move, and you resist some things. But everyone talked about this thing resisting fairies like Xerneas, which was really good, but Xerneas just isn't very popular. So for that reason, low C, high D for this Pokemon as well. But it has some things going for it. Fast Tailwind, things like that. With the updates to speed mechanics, though, like, there's just 2 cream of the crop Tailwind users that we'll get to when we encounter them. Galarian Darmanitan. I've seen this thing a little bit. I think it's unfair to put it too low. I think it has some niche, but I just don't think I don't think it's a very good Pokemon overall. It gets Zen mode or Guerrilla Tactics. Guerrilla Tactics is basically just a choice band for it, so you can run Choice Scarf plus Guerrilla Tactics, and you can get a huge offensive attack. But this thing just doesn't survive any attacks, and it's not super fast, so it kind of needs to have Choice Scarf. It just never really took off. I faced one every once in a while on ladder, but it's just not a very good Pokemon. So I'm gonna put it here. Low C, high D again for this mon. Diggersby hasn't really seen much usage. It's okay. Huge Power is a good ability, but kind of needs the Choice Scarf because it's not very fast. So I think it's down here for sure. Dracovish and Dracozolt. I think they're both higher than D tier, but Dracozolt I think might be in like upper C because it takes better advantage of its Sand Rush, and it's a very good answer to Sun. So these both got Sand Rush for their hidden abilities through the hidden ability patch, which allows it to double its speed in sand. And I think they're both very good Pokemon, but I think Dracozolt might be a bit better than Dracovish right now because it's a better answer to a lot of the Sun teams. It doesn't do that well against Groudon specifically, but it does very well against Venusaur and Charizard because it can offensively pressure them without getting its damage reduced by Sun, and can set up electric terrain to ignore sleep and can outspeed them. So I think Dracozolt better than Dracovish, but they're both probably like high C, low B Pokemon. I think I'm going to go like this. I'm a higher on Dracozolt than I am on Dracovish. So I think B tier. I think Dracovish is better than all these other Pokemon, so I'm going to put it in B tier as well. Dragalge never really took off. I think it's just not able to be evaluated. People were talking about it with Bulldoze weakness policy stuff, but it doesn't outspeed Amoonguss and doesn't pressure it. So again, it has the Amoonguss problem in Trick Room, right? So this Pokemon never really quite did it for me. So I think it's just down here. Dragapult I think is an A tier Pokemon. It might be S. A tier for sure. It's seeing a lot of play. I took a tally as well here from the Players Cup. Dragapult was on 12 teams, and it was a pretty even mix of support Dragapult with Colossal and offensive Dragapult with Zacian. People are running Adamant Pult as a Sun answer with safety goggles because you outspeed the Charizard, and you also pressure the Charizard with Max Phantasms. You outspeed and pressure the Venusaur with Max Airstreams. So this Pokemon definitely an A tier. Very good supportive capabilities as well. Gets access to Will-O-Wisp, gets access to Breaking Swipe, screens. This Pokemon can do everything. So definitely an A tier Pokemon. Dragonite, I saw Dragonite specifically. I think it was on one team that made Players Cup, and it was an Aqua Jet Pokemon for Colossal. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in the D tier. It has that one niche, but other than that, this Pokemon just isn't very good. It struggles immensely in this metagame. It's one of the only Dragon types that didn't get benefited from Dynamax. So I think this Pokemon is down here. Just isn't fast enough. It is immune to Intimidate with Inner Focus, but then it loses Multiscale, and Multiscale was part of the reason why it was so good. It was just so bulky, but it just really doesn't quite match up with where you want it to be in a metagame like this. So the Aqua Jet for the Colossal is the only thing that I think it does well, unfortunately. Duraludon kind of stopped seeing play. Things got faster than it. Things pressure it. It stopped seeing play really around Series 5, Series 6. When Series 7 rolled around. I think I'm going to put it in D tier just because I think the Pokemon is a very good Pokemon. It's won some regionals, or won regionals in Dallas. It's a good Pokemon, but really difficult Pokemon to utilize because it kind of wants to run Assault Vest. It kind of has to run Assault Vest to be bulky enough, and it struggles a lot in the metagame, especially when you start talking about Snarl and Eerie Impulse and things like that. And yeah, so D tier Pokemon for Duraludon. Durant, not applicable. Durant hasn't been good since like Series 2 or 3. Once we started to get more fire types and Incineroar and stuff like that, this thing struggled immensely. So not quite good anymore. Dusclops, I think Dusclops is actually Dusclops is a B tier Pokemon, upper B tier, low A tier. This has been one of the best Trick Room setters in the format for a long time. It did get a little bit worse when Urshifu came out, but it's still like a fine Pokemon. Very good support moves. It gets access to a ton of moves to proc weakness policy for the ally. Gets Nightshade for good damage output. It's got Trick Room. It's got Pain Split, Will-O-Wisp, Taunt. It learns a ton of good moves. So B tier Pokemon for sure. Entei. I think Entei is also a B tier Pokemon. I think it's upper B tier. It's got a lot of things going for it. Inner Focus got buffed, so you can actually run Sacred Fire Entei with Snarl to be a really good partner for some teams. It also gets Bulldoze to proc weakness policy on things like Metagross. So good Pokemon overall. It's got a lot of things going for it with that change of Inner Focus. Solid B tier. Escavalier. So Escavalier I am not going to put down here. I think Escavalier is like D tier, C tier. It does have a problem with cycling Intimidates, but it still is a very, very good Pokemon. It's one of the few Trick Room Pokemon that can actually just straight up ignore Amoonguss because of Overcoat. Overcoat makes it immune to residual damage from weather conditions, specifically hail and sandstorm, as well as powder moves. So you don't get your attacks redirected by Rage Powder, and you can't be put to sleep with Spore and Sleep Powder. So you can completely ignore Amoonguss, you are a little bit weak to Intimidate cycling, so you do have to be mindful of that. And you also struggle versus Incineroar, but you do get some really solid moves. It gave it access to close combat, Drill Run, you get Razor Shell. These are all like solid moves that this thing did not have access to before, that you can run. You can run Knockoff as well. A lot of good moves for this thing. It has a niche. It never really took off, but it is a solid Pokemon in my opinion. So low C, high D tier for that. Espeon, don't use this unless you're Wolf Glick. This Pokemon just isn't very good. Excadrill, this thing died off pretty hard, but I still think it's a solid Pokemon. I think it's the top end of D tier, low end of C tier. It might be low C. This Pokemon's got a ton of utility. Sand Rush is very good, especially when you talk about like setting it up with Swords Dance next to a Amoonguss and then switching in some way to set up Sand and sweeping that way. This Pokemon, the reality of why this Pokemon was so good is because of its max moves. They boosted defensive stats. Max Quake and Max Steel Spike, both they boost their respective defenses, and that can be really potent alongside something like Dusclops or Porygon. So Excadrill, solid C tier. Ferrothorn, I think, is a B tier Pokemon, upper B, low C. I think it's going to be like, it's very good against Kyogre. Grass types are very good right now, and it's still a very solid end game like Bronzong and Celesteela. Garchomp I think is a B tier Pokemon. It's low B, high C. It's been underexplored a lot recently, just in general, but it's got good stab moves and good offensive capabilities. So that's Garchomp in my opinion. Gastrodon I think is a B tier Pokemon. Low C, high B again. Matches up well against Kyogre. Does pretty well against some of the other threats in the format. Gets access to Yawn, pretty solid. Gengar, unfortunately not good anymore. Dragapult, Spectrier, Calyrex, Shadow. These Pokemon just dumpster this Pokemon. Regieleki can break Sash. Not great. Gigalith, I think, is a upper D tier, low C tier Pokemon again, just like a Escavalier. Has a lot of things going for it inside Trick Room, but never really quite took off. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put it in that tier. I think Glacier is a very good Pokemon. I think it's an A tier Pokemon for sure. It didn't get worse. Calyrex is technically an upgrade, but you can still run this thing, and it's a menace. It was one of the most prominent threats in Series 7. Doesn't really change. I think Gothitelle is a B tier Pokemon, like high C, low B. It's got a lot of things going for it. I think I'm going to put it in C tier. Perish Trap with Lapras is something that you can do in an endgame. It gets Fake Out and Trick Room and things like that. So it's got a lot of things going for it. I think it's a solid Pokemon. Grimmsnarl is an insane Pokemon. I think it's an A tier, maybe S tier. It's just so good. Prankster Screens is very, very solid, and you still get access to like Spirit Break for good stab, Thunder Wave, Scary Face for speed control, Taunt, tons of moves there that I really, really like. Guzzlord, not used. Gyarados had a huge falling. There's a ton of flying types in the metagame, and there's better flying types in this thing. If you really wanted to make it work, you could, but I think it's just not very good anymore. I think Hatterene's a D tier Pokemon as well. It struggles versus Amoonguss because Amoonguss can redirect its attacks and put it to sleep because of the Fairy move, and it just like doesn't really match up that well against Glastrier and some of the other Steel types. And yeah, it's probably towards the top of D tier, low C. So Hatterene, big fall from grace there. Heatran saw a ton of play. I think it's a C tier Pokemon for sure. The Japanese metagame has a ton of them. I think it's probably around here. It's a good Pokemon. Its stabs are very it gets Earth Power. It can boost its defenses. Set up the Sun for its water weakness. It's got some things going for it, but the 4 times to ground is a big deal. 4 times weakness to ground really sucks. Hippowdon, not applicable. Despite my love for Hitmontop, I also think it goes in this tier. It could potentially go at like the bottom of D tier, just because it does get access to Wide Guard, Fake Out, and a reasonable offensive stat with close combat. So I'll put it in the low D tier. I'm a little bit biased because I love this Pokemon, but I actually think it does have some things going for it. Hydreigon has seen a recent resurgence. There was 1 or 2 people in the Players Cup that had it. I think it's low B tier. It's a fantastic check to Sun. It's got Levitate. It's a Dragon typing to resist the elemental offensive moves, and it is a good check to Calyrex. So for that reason, I think it's a solid B tier Pokemon. You kind of have to run Safety Goggles or Lumberry, but I still think it's quite good. All right, here he is, the man of the hour. This thing is our first S tier Pokemon. It's just so good. It's so good. I think that I'm actually going to put Hydreigon up here, but this thing is nuts. This thing was on after pulling all of the data from the winners and losers brackets of Players Cup 3. This thing was on 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 33 teams. 33 teams had Incineroar. It does everything. Intimidate, Snarl, Parting Shot, Flare Blitz, Fake Out, U-Turn, can carry Assault Vest, can carry Safety Goggles, can carry Sugar Berry, can carry Citrus Berry. This thing does everything. I would highly recommend if you like need a good support duo. Incineroar and Moongus are phenomenal together. They cover each other well, and it's just a good Pokemon. It's a phenomenal Pokemon. Okay, Indeedee Male is like, it has some things going for it, but I think it's a D tier. It didn't really pick up. Indeedee Female, on the other hand, I think is quite good. I think it's a B tier Pokemon for sure. It's a good support Pokemon. It's up here with these other like high B tiers. I actually think I'm gonna do this. Yeah, it's a very good Pokemon. Bulky, sets up terrain. Follow Me, good pairing with Calyrex, Shadow Rider. It's a good Pokemon for sure. But Indeedee Male never really took off outside of hyper offensive teams for an Imprisoned Trick Room user that sets up terrain and gets Expanding Force. So, Inteleon, unfortunately, not good. I tried to use it back in like Series 5 or 6. Wasn't quite there. Another big one that fell from grace is Jellicent. Jellicent was a good Trick Room setter for a while, but it hasn't really been good since like Series 3. Still has some things going for it, so I'm going to put it in the D tier. Water Absorb, Cursed Body, both good abilities. Sets up Trick Room, Shadow Ball, Water Spout, Strength Sap. It does a lot of things. Jinx, Francesco Pardini made its number 1 on the ladder with Jinx, but I don't think it's a particularly good Pokemon right now. So it's a D tier Pokemon for sure. Kartana. Kartana's an A tier Pokemon indefinitely. Very, very good Pokemon. Can snowball on these Kyogre teams that get it in position well. Loves being inside the rain. Gets access to really good coverage moves and max moves, and also carries Assault Vest and can really snowball out of control in the late game. Where did we leave off? Kingdra. I think Kingdra is a B tier Pokemon for sure. I think it has some things going for it on these Kyogre teams. It can give Airstream boosts, take advantage with Swift Swim. Can be a nice alternative or a nice offensive option alongside Kyogre rather than Torn. If Torn is weak to, if your opponent has Fake Outs and different things like that, this thing is pretty reasonable. I think I've seen it a bit more. There was how many? There was 2 in the Players Cup. They were both on Kyogre teams, so definitely a solid Pokemon, worth exploring. Klefki, not applicable. Landorus T. Landorus T is going to be, I think it's an A tier Pokemon. It's towards the top of A tier. I don't think it's quite as good as Incineroar. I think Incineroar is by far the best Intimidate user in the metagame, but Landorus is very close, number 2. Carries the Assault Vest well, can be very bulky. Good answer to some of the Sun teams with Max Rockfall and Max Airstream. And Earthquake is very strong. This thing's just a good Pokemon. I think it's a solid Pokemon. Upper A tier, low S tier for sure. Landorus Incarnate. I've seen some people using it as a Sheer Force Life Orb user, so for that reason it's going to be in the upper C tier here, low B tier. I think I might put it in B. It's got some things going for it, right? I like the Pokemon a lot. It doesn't really want to Dynamax, but that's okay. It fits nicely on some of these other teams. And I think it's a solid Pokemon, to say the least. Lapras. I've been using a lot of Lapras. I don't want to let that skew my actual rating for it. It is a solid B tier Pokemon. I definitely think it's got a lot of things going for it. I don't think it's quite an A tier. I think it's definitely B tier. It's got some weaknesses. The team is slow and exploitable, and you kind of have to play well to utilize this team. These 3 Pokemon are staples of this team, and often Zacian as well, but you can, if your opponent plays better than you, you will lose. You don't have like an I win button for some of these other matchups. You don't have like Sleep Powder, Venusaur, or residual damage or whatever. You really have to like think when you play this team, and like it's a positioning game. It's a lot of switching, a lot of using your resistances and things like that. So good team though, good Pokemon, but it's definitely like it's a slow team. It's a lot of smart switching and things like that. Latios and Latias I don't think are particularly impactful. I think Latias has a bit more utility than Latios. I think it's got a niche for sure. Latios just doesn't really see any play, but Latias gets Tailwind, Bulldoze, Mystical Fire, good supporting moves. So I think it's a D tier. Not applicable. Lilligant, I've seen some Lilligant. Lilligant is probably going to be low C tier for me. I think Lilligant is really good alongside. It gets after you Chlorophyll with Sleep Powder and Leaf Storm, and it's a good support Pokemon. Really good at allowing Torkoal or Groudon to move very quickly inside of Sun. So I like Lilligant. Ludicolo doesn't see any play, unfortunately. Ludicolo just isn't quite there. It's got a niche. I think that tier is a little bit unfair to Ludicolo, but I think Ludicolo is like a fine Pokemon. Watergrass is a good typing, but it struggles a little bit offensively and really needs to be inside of rain to function well. And it's also weak to flying. So I've seen some niche Pokemon or some niche teams use. I can't even think of what this thing's called right now, but it's still, I think I'm going to still put it here. Lycanroc also is going to go here. We really haven't seen much Magnezone, but I still think Magnezone is a D tier Pokemon. I used it a little bit in Series 6, 5. Yeah, Series 5, it saw some usage for a little while before it ended up on the ban list because of singles, but it's a cool Pokemon. It's got some things going for it. It definitely has a niche. Mamoswine, I think Mamoswine is a solid C tier Pokemon. I definitely think it's a better ground type than Excadrill. It's probably around this range. Got really good offensive capabilities. Oblivious is immune to Intimidate, which is fantastic. So I think I'm going to put it here for sure. Mandibuzz, not particularly good. It has some things going for it, but it's tough to use in doubles. I'll put it at the top of this tier, maybe at the low end of this tier. Mantine really hasn't seen any play anytime recently. Technically a Swift Swim user that gets Airstream, but it's 4 times weak to Electric, and Regieleki's in the format, so definitely better flying types you can use. Alolan Marowak, definitely like low C tier for sure. It's got a lot of things going for it. It's really strong, but it struggles inside Trick Room against Amoonguss. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put it there. Regular Marowak, I don't even know. I think somewhere... I don't know how to evaluate this Pokemon, so I'm going to leave it in this tier. Same with this Pokemon. Meowstic doesn't really do that much. Uxie or Mesprit. This is Mesprit. It goes here as well. Metagross, I think, is an A tier Pokemon. We've seen some rain teams adapt Metagross onto their other teams. So I think that Metagross is a solid option. Takes advantage of the Tailwind that Tornadus can set up, as well as Brutal Swing for weakness policy. It's a good Pokemon. I think it's an A tier Pokemon for sure. I think that some people have been using, what is this thing called? Mienshao, because of Inner Focus. And I think it pressures Incineroar. I think it's a good answer to Incineroar. I'm going to put it in upper C tier. Some people have talked about it being good. I've just never used it, so it's tough for me to evaluate. But I think Mienshao is an interesting Pokemon. Milotic, I think, is definitely a B tier Pokemon. This thing, I kind of fell out of love with Milotic, but it still deters Intimidate, and some teams are running double Intimidate, and it does pressure both Incineroar and Landorus very, very hard. So it does struggle versus Alecki, though, so you do have to kind of use it sparingly, but I think it's an upper B tier Pokemon for sure. Moltres Galar, definitely an A tier Pokemon in my opinion, although I will say it might be more fair to put it in B tier. It has felt really underwhelming inside of Series 8 so far, so I think that it definitely feels like it should be... it feels like it I don't know. To me, it feels very underwhelming and feels like people have answers for it on their teams already. So I think Moltres goes there for sure. Mimikyu. Oh, I grabbed Centiskorch by mistake. Sorry about that. Mimikyu. Mimikyu is a very good, very high B tier Pokemon for me. I think it does a lot of things very well in this metagame. A lot of the things that pressured offensively, it does a lot of the things that pressured offensively are too fast to you want something to break this thing's disguise, and then pressure it. So things like Calyrex Shadow can't kill it on turn one, and it sets up Trick Room very reliably. So that's Mimikyu in my opinion. Very solid B tier Pokemon. Original Moltres, unrateable. Mudsdale. I think Mudsdale is like upper D tier, low C tier Pokemon. I used it in Series 7 and it was pretty solid. It has some things going for it. It's immune to Intimidate, different things like that. I like it, but for this reason as well, I think it's still just not quite there in this metagame. So I think it's low C, high D tier. Naganadel, difficult for me to rate. I'm not going to. Both of the Nidos, I think they've got things going for them. I think they're D tier Pokemon, but they just really never caught on in this metagame. So Sheer Force Life Orb is really solid, obviously. We've got, I think Nihilego is an underexplored Pokemon in this series right now, Series 8. It was a huge threat in Series 7, and Series 8 really changed it. I still think it's a B tier Pokemon, low B, high C. It's got a lot of things going for it, really strong stab options. Unfortunately, Alolan Ninetales is not very good. I still think it has some things going for it. Regular Ninetales also just the worst Sunsetter that you can use. This Pokemon sets Hail, gets Aurora Veil. It's just like, why would you use, if you want Aurora Veil, just use Lapras. You know, there's other options that you can run, but this thing has some utility. So Amistar, not applicable. Berserker, again, not applicable in my opinion. I think Oranguru is a D tier Pokemon for me. It has a niche, but it hasn't really seen much play in this metagame. So for me, it's going to be a D tier Pokemon. The Alolan Persian has a lot of things going for it, and we've seen it in like Series 6 and Series 7, but not in Series 8. So I'm going to leave it in D tier. Again, though, I think some of these Pokemon might need to go down. I'm just kind of throwing these all in D tier, but definitely some of these other ones I rate a little bit higher than some of these ones in the mid-level. Pheromosa, Speed Swap is good. The stab options it gets are good. I think I'm going to put it in like C tier, like mid C tier somewhere. It's a good Pokemon. These Pokemon all need to go down. Gmax Pikachu, not really very good. I think that's a bit unfair. I think maybe D tier. It's got some things going for it. Light Ball's pretty nuts, but not amazing. Politoed. I think Politoed is high C, low D. It's got a lot of things going for it right now. Even though a lot of people are using Kyogre, I've seen some people take advantage of Politoed as a good support Pokemon. Drizzle, Helping Hand, Perish Song, Scald. These are all good moves that this thing can utilize. Porygon Z never really caught on in this series. I still think it's like an upper D tier Pokemon, maybe low C, but I think it has some. I think I might move Excadrill down too, actually. I don't know. It's tough. Excadrill was so dominant for so long. But anyway, Porygon Z has some things going for it. It pairs nicely with Clefairy, gets really strong Hyper Beams, but it's just not as fast anymore. It really only dominated towards the end of Series 5 and most of Series 6 because it was faster than everything and was such a dominant offensive threat. Porygon 2 in my opinion is an S tier Pokemon. It's probably the best Trick Room setter all around. Mimikyu sometimes sets it more reliably, but Porygon 2 is just like so unbelievably bulky. It's phenomenal typing for defensive purposes, being just a normal type, and I think that it's just so hard to remove. There was a bunch of Porygon. There was 13 Porygon in the Players' Cup, so really solid Pokemon, very good setting Trick Room and very annoying to deal with. We've seen some people adapt their sets to be Trace Intimidates and then run Eerie Impulse and Foul Play for offensive capabilities. So really good Pokemon. Where do we leave off? Here. Primarina. I think Primarina, it's unfair of me to put Primarina too low. I think it's like low C. It still sees some play. It still is reasonable, but it definitely to me feels like it's just a worse option than like Tapu Fini. But Primarina still has some things going for it. It's more offensive, and doesn't necessarily. It's a bit better in Trick Room and can match up reasonably well against some things. So C tier Pokemon for me. Raichu, I think Raichu was tough for me to evaluate because I think in Series 7, for me, I think Raichu was like closer to S tier, or a high A tier. But for me, I think Raichu is just a solid B tier Pokemon. Lightning Rod's good, Fake Out's good. It gets Eerie Impulse, gets Nuzzle, gets Charm. A lot of good support moves for Raichu. I think it's a good Pokemon, but I don't think it's quite good enough for A tier. It's definitely not as good as these other Pokemon, and it's not better than some of these other B tier Pokemon, but I think it has a lot going for it. So B tier for that. Raikou, I think saw some play. I think it's a low C tier Pokemon. It's got some things going for it: Snarl, Bulldoze, different things like that. But it just never really caught on as well as Entei did at doing that sort of a game plan. So for me, low C. Regice, not applicable. Regidrago, I think is a D tier Pokemon. It might be low C. I think Regidrago is better than all these Pokemon in the D tier. So it has some things going for it, but it ultimately just doesn't really do as much. There's a lot of fairy types. Zacian beats this thing. Primarina, Tapu Fini, these things are all... Any fairy type is going to beat this thing. So, yeah, Regidrago for me there. Regieleki, I think Alecki... It's either high A or low S. I think it's an A tier. I think Amoonguss is actually like closer to here, but I think Regieleki's a phenomenal Pokemon. There was 5, 10, 15, 20, 21 Regieleki. It was the third most used Pokemon in the... Yeah, third most used Pokemon, or tied for second with Venusaur for usage in the Players' Cup. So definitely a solid Pokemon. Electroweb is good, Volt Switch is good, Thunderbolt's good. Regigigas, I think, is mid C, low B. I think it's a low B. It has a lot of applicability in this metagame. It can do some interesting things, but it's a best of one Pokemon for sure. Best of three. There's just a lot of things players can do to get around it. There's a lot of faster things now that can pressure it. So for me, I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Regirock and Registeel were both Pokemon that I think Regirock is like low C, high D, and I think Regirock was very good in Series 7, but I don't think it's very good in Series 8. And I actually think that Registeel's low B, high C. This thing does a body press endgame very, very well, probably better than these Pokemon do it, but it doesn't, like, I think it's probably closer to up here, but solid Pokemon for sure. Rhydon, not applicable. Reuniclus fell from grace. It's a D tier Pokemon. Has some things going for it, just doesn't really do them all very well anymore. Kind of like Hatterene. Where did I put Hat? I don't remember where I put Hat. Maybe she fell out. I don't know. Reuniclus does a similar job as Hat. Oh, there's Hat. Similar job as Hatterene. They were both very, very good Trick Room sweepers for a long time. They just really fell out of grace. Rhyperior is another similar Pokemon. Rhyperior was very, very good in early metagame, but when Rillaboom came out, Rillaboom really punished Rhyperior a lot. So Rhyperior to me is a D tier Pokemon. Rillaboom, I think Rillaboom is an A tier Pokemon. High B, low A. I think it's A tier though. It's a very good Pokemon. Very, very good ability with grassy terrain. Good offensive capabilities. Can be defensive and carry Assault Vest, or can be run. It's good against Kyogre. Can be run offensively with Choice Band or Miracle Seed. The Rotom Frost, not applicable. Same with Rotom Mow, but both Rotom Wash and Rotom Heat go up in my opinion. Rotom Heat is a phenomenal answer to Sun. I think they're both B tier Pokemon. Rotom Heat does a phenomenal job at beating Sun, or at least like giving you a solid check to Sun. And Rotom Wash has been, I think Rotom Wash is worse than Rotom Heat right now, but they're both good Pokemon, obviously. Rotom Heat's great against Sun, carry safety goggles, pressure them offensively, can't get touched by Groudon really without Rock Slide. And Rotom Wash has some other utility, just being a good offensive water type. We're getting there. We're getting to the end here. Sort of. Sableye, I think, has seen some play recently as a as a support Pokemon. I think it's like a mid C tier Pokemon, probably upper C tier. Gets Prankster, Sunny Day, and things like that. Gets Quash, so I think it's a good Pokemon. Mence, Mence is a D tier Pokemon in my opinion. It never really caught on. I think it's like upper D tier. It's got a lot of things going for it, but it just didn't really catch on as much as it has in other formats. It's tough to sweep through um, double intimidate mons, and there's a lot of things like Glastrier and things like that check it. So without its mega, it's a bit lackluster. Sandaconda not applicable. Sceptile not applicable. Caesar was another one. I think you could use Caesar if you wanted. It has some things going for it, but it's the Dynamax format with everyone having so much extra HP made Caesar so much worse, in my opinion. Scrafty, a D tier Pokemon. Probably higher on this D tier list than Hitmontop, but has some things going for it. Intimidate, Fake Out, 4 times weakness to Fairy, though. Seismitoad as well is a D tier Pokemon. It's got Swift Swim, can be offensive water type inside of Rain. It's a solid Pokemon. I think Shedinja is a meme, but as always, it's a D tier Pokemon. It can win you games if you take out the answers to it and you build around it. So, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. We already talked about Snorlax in my last video, but we'll talk about it again. I think it's a D tier Pokemon. It has a lot of things going for it, like it always does, but the Dynamax format really, really put a hamper on Snorlax's ability to do anything. You kind of have to build like a weird hybrid set that does different things, like it can yawn stuff, but also it might have access to Belly Drum, and then like maybe you like try to set up a situation where you can run a Lecky plus Clefairy on your team, and then you can like Volt Switch into Clefairy and Belly Drum if your opponent doesn't target Snorlax, and then you're like boosted Lax. But it just doesn't. Belly Drum hasn't been good in a Dynamax format because it's too slow. Dynamax is such a fast mechanic sometimes with speed boosts and everything that it makes it so tough to use. Spectrier is an A tier Pokemon in my opinion. If not an A tier, it's low B tier for sure. Sorry, it's taking me a while to scroll up here. I think it's an A tier Pokemon. It has a lot of things going for it. Phenomenal speed and ability, good support or offensive Pokemon. I like it a lot. I used Stack Attack a fair bit on some of these Sun teams. I think it's a upper C tier, low B tier Pokemon. It's got Trick Room. It's a good Steel type. It has Wide Guard, has Gyro Ball. It can be offensive with Rock Slide as well, but not the best Trick Room setter or the best Steel type in the format, but has a slightly good niche, the slowest Pokemon in Trick Room that you can use. So B tier Pokemon for me. Suicune. I think Suicune might be a B tier Pokemon. If not, it's very high C. I'll put it in high C. It's got Tailwind. It's got Inner Focus, so it can't be flinched. It's a very bulky Pokemon, so I like it. Scald is a good offensive move. Swampert. I think Swampert's D. Swampert has some things going for it. Some people have used it, but I don't think it's particularly impressive myself. Sylveon, again, D tier Pokemon. Huge fall from grace. It was so good for so long, despite Excadrill being popular, but now it just like doesn't do anything, and it gets run over by all these really offensive physical mons. Talonflame, I think, is like upper D, low C. It has more things going for it than a lot of the Pokemon in the D tier. Gale Wings Tailwind is really good, but the nerf to Gale Wings really put this Pokemon in check. You can't just spam Brave Bird anymore. You have to once you drop below full HP, Gale Wings is shut off. So for that reason, I think it's a low C tier Pokemon. All right, we're almost done. Bulu has never seen play in this metagame. Feeney's higher rated than Primarina for me, but it really dipped off. It really dipped off in this metagame because it just doesn't really like. It used to, in Series 7, it was a setup Pokemon for an endgame. You could use Protect and Calm Mind and Leftovers to stall out a lot of people's Dynamaxes. And it was very good against like the endgame, right? You could set up a couple of Calm Minds and Moonblast Muddy Water things in the endgame. But it was very difficult it's very difficult to use in this metagame. There's a lot of things that pressure it from the restricted side of things, and it doesn't. I think the only one I've seen use it. How many were there? Let's see. There was two Feeney in the Players' Cup. I know that Eduardo Cunha has been using it as a support, like Heal Pulse, Icy Wind set, which I think is probably fine. But offensive, like Calm Mind to protect leftovers, it just isn't as good as it used to be. So B tier Pokemon for me. Probably be good again in Series 9. Coco for me is a C tier. There's really no outside of being a fairy type and being outside of being a fairy type and being a and setting up terrain, there's no reason to run this thing over Regieleki. So Regieleki can do everything that this thing can do except for click Dazzling Gleam and set up electric terrain without maxing. So for me, I think Aleki's the better electric type. Lele, we've actually seen a recent uptick in Lele's usage despite it not really catching on until now. It's very good pairing with Spectrier. Spectrier is very fast. It can drop speed for you and benefits from the terrain if you choose to match it. Sorry, Calyrex Shadow Rider is what I'm talking about, not Spectrier. You set up terrain for the expanding forest. You also get Moonblast, which can help Calyrex Shadow Rider deal with or dark types with Fairy Stab. So I like Lele right now specifically. All right, Terrakion, like mid D tier. Whoever made this tier list, they put a ton of Pokemon on this list. I didn't think it would take me this long. Low C tier for Terrakion. Not a particularly impressive Pokemon. Tornadus, Thundurus. I think Thundurus is actually an A tier Pokemon. It's like pretty high A. Defiant is so good. Max Airstream is very, very, very good. I think that it has a ton of things going for it. And I think it's a very solid Pokemon if you need a fast Airstream user on your team to also defer Intimidate. I haven't really seen this Pokemon, so I'm going to put it here. Landorus Incarnate, or Thundurus Incarnate, I haven't really seen. Togepi has some things going for it, but I think Raichu is just better in this metagame. So I'm going to put it in D tier. Togekiss, like mid. This is probably the Pokemon that had fallen from grace the most, but it's probably still like upper D tier, low C tier. I don't think it's as good as some of these other Mons, and it's probably a C tier Pokemon. I think so is Mens. I'm gonna revise this. These three Pokemon are going up here. It has some things going for it, but it's ultimately like it's no longer an offensive threat anymore. I think bulky Togekiss with Yawn and taking advantage of its very, very good defensive typing of Fairy Flying makes it a good follow me bulky Pokemon on your team. Mr. Torkoal. Torkoal is going up into the A tier, high B, low A, but it's still like it's a phenomenal Pokemon. You don't have to run Groudon to have Torkoal be a good Pokemon. I think I'm gonna put it in high B. Yawn, Burning Jealousy, Body Press. That Pokemon's very, very good. Tornadus Incarnate, not really applicable. Tornadus, or I guess these are Therian forms. Excuse me. Thundurus Incarnate and Tornadus Incarnate are both A tier Pokemon in my opinion. This thing gets Prankster Tailwind. It gets Hurricane. Pairs nicely with Kyogre. Also gets Brutal Swing for Metagross. I think it's a good Pokemon for sure. All right, we are almost done. Not applicable here. Serena has some things going for it. I'll put it in D tier. Tyranitar, we've seen a very recent resurgence of Tyranitar. Series 7, it was not very good, but I think it's actually like a mid C tier Pokemon. It's probably better than Coco. I think Coco is farther down this list. I think if I was going to actually like move some of these Pokemon around, I think these are all probably higher than it. And these all might be B tier Pokemon anyway, but Tyranitar is a good Pokemon against Calyrex Shadow Rider. It's a good dark type. I think it's a solid Pokemon. So definitely not as good as it used to be, but it's still a fine Pokemon to include on your team. It's a good pairing alongside Dracozolt. It's probably the best Sandstream setter we have. So in fact, it is the best Sandstream setter we have. Umbreon. This Pokemon has actually been sneaking up in the metagame usage. I think it's a solid Pokemon. I think it's a high B, low A Pokemon for sure. You get access to Yawn, Foul Play, Snarl, and Moonlight with Citrus Berry. This thing's very hard to get through. It can wall a lot of teams. Good against the Shadow Rider. So I like Umbreon a lot. Urshifu Dark. This thing might be S tier. It's definitely A tier. It's just so good. It didn't slow down at all in this new metagame. I might have to revise this. I think Aleki is probably an S tier Pokemon. I think these two Pokemon, though, I think they're pretty close together. I think all of this is pretty fair. Yeah, Urshifu Dark is so good. Urshifu Water is also quite good. I think Water might have actually been more popular in this tournament because of the Colossal teams. But I still think that Urshifu Water is a solid A tier Pokemon. It might be high B, low A, but it's up there. Uxie, not applicable. Vanillux, I'll put it in D tier. It's got some things going for it, but if you want to run Hail plus Aurora Veil, I think you should run Alolan Ninetales first, and then from there you can run Lapras after, if you want a better option from there. Venusaur, I think Venusaur is an S tier Pokemon. This thing's just stupid. It's so fast, and it presents so many options. Part of the reason why Sun is so good is because it can present so many options. It can present Sleep Powder, can present Trick Room, can present Airstream, can present, like, Venusaur was tied for Regieleki for second most used Pokemon in Players Cup. So I think Venusaur is so good. You can run bulky Life Orb or bulky Kobo Berry. You can actually outspeed Aleki and pressure it with Earth Power. You also have access to Weather Ball, which turns into Max Flare in the sun. So very good Pokemon, S tier Pokemon in my honest opinion. Virizion is not applicable. Weavile also not applicable. Galarian Weezing, I'll put Weavile in the D tier actually because it did see a little bit of play as a Surf beat up user for Colossal Cobalion teams. Galarian Weezing is, in my opinion, I'll put it in D tier just to be fair to it because it is a reasonable Pokemon, but regular Weezing is just so much better because you're not weak to Steel. So you don't have a weakness to Steel, and you get access to Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, Protect, and Sludge Bomb. It's definitely not A tier, excuse me. It's probably low C. Where I put Gigas in B. I think I'm going to put Weezing in like mid C. Because it does have some good supporting things going for it, but it really only sees play alongside Regigigas. So for that reason, I think Weezing's a C tier Pokemon. Volcarona, here, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. I think this Pokemon is a D tier Pokemon because it's very, like, only seen very little play. Xurkitree, not applicable. 3 Pokemon left. I think Volcarona is actually like a reasonable Pokemon right now. There was 2 of them. I think there was 2 Volcarona in the Players Cup. It's a good Rage Powder user that also can reduce the damage of your opponents. I think it's a solid C tier Pokemon. It's got Struggle Bug and Heat Wave and Rage Powder and Flame Body and Protect, and I used it in Series 6. It's a solid Pokemon for sure. The last 2, Whimsicott, definitely an A tier Pokemon. This might be... It's a better Tailwind setter than Tornadus, despite Tornadus being a better overall Pokemon, because you can taunt Tornadus because you're faster, and you can also set up Tailwind before it too. It's a better Tailwind setter, but like I said, Tornadus actually has offensive capabilities that Whimsicott does not. Also, Whimsicott's immune to Spore and Amoonguss stuff. Zapdos for me is going to be a high B tier Pokemon. I think this Pokemon hasn't got a lot of love in Series 8, but it's still very good. It's good against the Sun teams, good against Kyogre teams. Phenomenal typing, resists both of Zacian's most common attacks, but it's just like the main thing you have to decide is like which one's better for your team, Thundurus or Zapdos. And most of the time, I think it's fair to say 6 or 7 times out of 10, Thundurus is going to be better. So this is my tier list. This took a while. It was an hour and 20-minute video, but we got it. We got there. A lot of these Pokemon aren't very applicable, but I think, like, definitely the S and the A tier are very close together. Some of these A tier Pokemon could easily be an S tier. The B tier is kind of all over the place. There's some speculative picks, but I think these Pokemon are fine to put on your team. They've got a lot of things going for them. C tier Pokemon are like niche. Like I said, they've got some usage. Not super common though, and then D tier Pokemon were like the big fall from grace Pokemon, but still have some utility, and then obviously the not applicable category, and then repeats as well as legends that we already ranked. So I think if you were going to build a team and you were going to start with these S, A, and B tier Pokemon, you'd be very happy with your picks, and you could probably build a solid team from that. So that's going to do it for me, though. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to go get some water. My voice is pretty shot. So thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy this type of content because I enjoy making it. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next video.